Good evening, everyone. Coming to you live from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm Scott Harrison, Artistic Director of Ironweed Productions, and I want to welcome you to Talking Theater Live. For those of you joining us for the first time, Talking Theater Live is a series of live conversations between myself and Santa Fe theater artists, sharing stories about their journey in the theater and the unique path that led them to doing theater in Santa Fe. I'm honored to have as my guest this evening Santa Fe writer and actor Marguerite Scott. Marguerite, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Marguerite, her recent play, Flight Plan, premiered at the Santa Fe Playhouse this spring. And more recently, it received a reading at the last Frontier Theater Festival in Theater Conference in Valdez, Alaska. And there is some new exciting news regarding that, which I will actually let Marguerite share here in a moment. Marguerite, I usually like to start these interviews kind of going back to the beginning, but with this one, I'd actually like to start with the most recent. And just tell me about the experience of taking your play to the last Frontier Theater Conference.
Well, I tell you, it's been on my bucket list since I first heard about the last Frontier Theater Conference. It was started, I think, 26 years ago by Edward Albee and Marshall W. Mason and another woman. It was like her idea, and she said, hey guys, what about this? And they did it. And for 26 years, and they've been bringing, it started smaller, but right off the bat, the intention was for playwrights to have a place to come to hear their plays read by actors and get feedback from their peers. And so Marshall W. Mason, and I'm not sure when he withdrew from it, but it was a while ago, and Dawson Moore, who lived in Valdez and started coming to the conference, or he lived in Anchorage, I'm not so sure. There was so much information there.
Right.
But anyway, he started to come to it as a young person and fell in love with it and fell in love with theater and kept going back every year. Well, they turned the leadership over to him.
Huh.
And Marshall W. Mason was there to get an award of this last conference, and he spoke about how Dawson has just made it even better, and it just continues to grow and evolve. And I don't know how many playwrights were there, but there were readings Monday through Friday from morning till the end, till dinner time. Full productions in the evenings, and there were 3 rooms with readings going on of plays each of those days. So, and then there's a fringe festival in the evening where you can submit to as well. I didn't get chosen for that, but I did get chosen to be an overnight writer. So basically, I was pulled an idea out of a hat Wednesday night, had till 10 a.m. to write a short play that they presented that night.
Wow.
So that was really great. I got to do that. I got to perform in a couple different things. I got to take a monologue workshop with Laura Gardner and get coaching with her and perform in the monologue workshop, which they do on the main stage. There's craft workshops. It's some people come just as an actor. It's only $50 to register. The cost is getting there and housing yourself. But there are inexpensive options. A lot of the younger people stay in the dorms. I'm not a younger person, but I did stay in that. I see why people spend the money for the motels. Thank you, Deborah. And so it's incredible. And I went there knowing one person physically, have known her for years, but I hadn't seen her in 15 years. But being Facebook friends with a ton of people that I got to meet for the first time, playwrights and actors and artistic directors. You would love it, Scott. You would I encourage any theater artist, actor, writer, director.
Yeah, gosh, it's funny because I hadn't heard about it, and then Debriana Mancini told me about it when she took the Meatball Chronicles there, and then I guess Michael Graves took I believe he took his show about one-person show about Mark Twain there. But anyway, and I had no idea Edward Albee was
It was he and Marshall were the artistic founders of it, and it's their principles that are still held to this day.
And 26 years it's been going on.
I think so. It's around that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what? So you're that's fascinating that you did an overnight play. What was the premise?
The prompt was a weird vacation adventure. And I was so exhausted. I had my rehearsal for my play that day. I was so exhausted. I was just so exhausted the whole time, but in a good way, because there's just so much to do and see and hear and meet. But so I set my alarm. I knew I couldn't do it Wednesday night, so I set my alarm for 6:45, and I
Just
pushed the sleep button. I didn't push the sleep button. The off, and I woke up at 8:30.
And when was it?
10
Oh,
a.m.
nice.
So Arlene Hutton, a.k.a. Beth Langs, had done a craft workshop, and I used one of her exercises. I walked to the Safeway to get a coffee. I came back, not a Safeway, whatever it's called there, cars, but basically it's Safeway. Yeah. I went, had my coffee, and pounded out this play, a 2-character play using the alphabet. And each character, you alternate the characters, and the first line, the first letter of the first word of the first line has to begin with A. The first letter of the second line has to begin with B.
Cool.
And C. So I wrote a short play using that, going through the alphabet, and I just barreled it out.
That's excellent. That is very cool.
But then what was so great is I got to act in something.
Yeah.
They cast me in one of the overnight fringe plays by Jan, oh my gosh, Probst. Oh my gosh, she wrote this fabulous play about an aging actress who's sitting in her mansion that she hasn't left for 10 years, being analyzed or examined by a therapist whom she thinks is a TV reporter. She believes. So I got to play this eccentric Gloria Swanson type character, just over the top. Right. We read it completely cold. Just got out there and did it, and it was just fabulous. It was just. So there's so many opportunities. You go up thinking, like, I'm going up there to do, you know, have my play read. But there were so many opportunities.
Oh, man.
Just sitting, having lunch with people.
Right.
I had taken an online class through the Dramatists Guild Institute a year ago on structure with Gary Garrison. And it was just an incredible class. We analyzed 18 plays over the 8 weeks of the course. And he was just a phenomenal teacher. I got to meet him. He was there leading a workshop. He was one of the guest artists. So I got to meet him in person. Yeah. And I brought him chilies from Santa Fe.
From Santa Fe.
Yes.
That's great. Gosh. And what was, because I know my wife's mother and stepfather lived in Anchorage for 15 years, so I went there twice. I mean, I didn't go to Valdez, but I went to Alaska twice, which was just, I mean, the majesty of the landscape is incredible. What was it like for you to, I mean, I know you were busy with the festival, but just being in Alaska, what was that like?
Well, it was recommended to me to not fly from Anchorage to Valdez, to take the drive, and I'm so glad I did. It was just so worth it, because I flew into Anchorage Friday night. The conference, Dawson Moore, is so well organized. So they put up once you're accepted, and then you say, yes, I am coming, and you reserve your slot. They have, at some point, it was like February maybe, they start posting a room share and a ride share. So I posted that I was looking for a ride from Anchorage to Valdez. So a woman, Jocelyn Payne, thank you very much, another playwright, it was her first time going. So she messaged me, so she picked me up from the Anchorage airport, housed me, I stayed overnight at her place, they fed me in the morning, and we drove to Valdez. And it's an 8-hour drive if you just drive straight through, but we stopped at the Musk Ox Farm, which she said is a must. Was a must, and it was. We stopped, I still have all these photos, I just haven't been able to post yet, but I did post one early on when I was on the trip. I just asked her to take a picture of me in the landscape. And it was, when you drive from Valdez, from Anchorage to Valdez, it was like going through like 3 different like here we have different climate zones.
Yeah.
It was like going through different climate zones. One you're struck right away with in Anchorage is just how green and lush it is. And Jocelyn said that it's the because the chloroform has to fight harder because you don't get as much sun. You know, you have these shorter seasons, so it's like a super sock of this chloroform.
Yeah.
It's just so intense. So you drive through these just vast lushness of mountains and trees, and then you start hitting the snow-capped mountains and the glaciers, and then and it's just, you know, I've craved really to just be out in land where it's untouched, and that truly is where you can go. I mean, climate change is a reality, and the glaciers are shrinking, and that's very painful for people there to watch and see that. But I got to see a moose on that ride. I got to see more moose on the way back. Eagles, bald eagles, all over the place. But it really does. It's like this sense of awe that, you know, it's, you know, and you just imagine, like, the first people that were there, and I mean, like, going back to the indigenous, you know, which Dawson Moore, it's called the Last Frontier Theater Conference. They're changing it next year till the Valdez Theater Conference, because they had this aha. Wait a minute, it's the last frontier for white conquerors.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Not for the indigenous people that live there. It's their home. So they're changing that to honor that.
Right. That's very cool. Gosh, what an incredible experience. And now, and also you, I just saw today on Facebook, you got some great news associated with your play that happened there. So tell us about that.
So my reading was the last day, it was the last slot of the last day of the readings, and at intermission, the artistic director, Callie, I should have it memorized by now, but my brain is still wonky. Callie, I'm going to get your name down, I promise. She's the artistic director of Midnight Summit Ensemble, which is a young, extraordinarily talented theater company in Chicago. They are a group, they started in Anchorage, Alaska, or they met in Anchorage, Alaska, moved together to Chicago and started this theater company in 2016. Their first production was No Exit, and then they've done several workshops of new plays. They're passionate about new plays. Well, the two main gals, Reagan played the Ariana in my play. She read it. She told Callie, you have to come see this reading. Well, they had been going for 8, 10, 12, 14 years. I don't know how many years you gals have been going to the Valdez Theater Conference. But they basically learned through that. They learned the process of working with new plays. And so they have this extraordinary respect for new plays. Well, the Sunday that I arrived Saturday night. They had a performance each night. So it was either Sunday or Monday night. There was a production of This Is Your Blood, a challenging play by a female playwright that was directed and produced by Midnight Summit Ensemble. And I watched that play. The performances, the production values, the direction were just phenomenal. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to work with them. And then Friday, they come up to me, the artistic director came up to me in intermission and said, I want to produce your play.
That's great. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
It's really so at the end, after the second act, I said, do you still want to? And she's like, oh yes. And she already had ideas.
Oh, great.
And so I asked her, I said, do you want to do a world premiere production or a workshop production? Because what was at the Santa Fe Playhouse was a workshop production, which means it's still a work in progress. And so she said a workshop production, and I was like, yay, because that's what you want until the play is really like, okay, there it is. That's what, as powerful as I can make it, that's really, for me, the workshop production was just such a tremendous experience. Vaughn Irving, I wrote the play because I was standing backstage to go on for Benchwarmers, and Vaughn announced opening night that they were going to produce a new play by a local playwright.
I'll be darned. And that was where you got,
And that was in October of last year. So
Yeah.
after the show, I said, so do you know what play it's going to be yet? And he says, no, I just started reading plays. So driving home, I was like, all right. It's not going to be my play they're going to choose, but I'm going to give myself this as a goal, as motivation to write another full-length play.
Mm-hmm.
I'd written a couple in the past, but it was never really... I never felt like they really got where they needed to be, and I didn't have this kind of process. So I had an idea for a play that had been running around my mind for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going to go, okay, do it. But I thought about it, and I thought, it's not really quite the right fit for the Santa Fe Playhouse for a couple different reasons. And then as I'm driving home, as you can see, I have a little bit of a drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do I need to say right now? And it just popped into my head. And what it was when Vaughn and I, goes back to Vaughn Irving again, we were backstage waiting. We were on a hold to go on for 1984 for the opening scene. And we had to kill some time. And so Vaughn said something about, I think I asked him about his next season. He says, you know what I'd really love to do is an all-female version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, man.
And I said, oh, yes, you got to do that. Oh, I'd love to be in the play like that.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the challenges of that. Maybe
Yeah.
it was such a good idea. And then right before we went on, and I was ready to go on when I went on. I really was. We was like the last weekend. And I go, I need to write a female version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I'd lived it. So on that drive home last October, I was like, that's what I need to write. And I gave myself 2 weeks. Ha, ha, ha. It took me a month.
Well, that's
to
still...
get, it still was. I was shaken. And the only reason, I had to start rehearsal for something else on November 4th. So I was like, I have to get it in by then. And so I was like literally shaking with exhaustion and fear when I handed it to him, and really having no expectations. And I just went ahead, and I was just like, okay, you know what? The deadline's coming up for Last Frontier Theater Conference. Such a slim chance, slim to none that I'll get in there, because they don't take many full-length plays. I'm not sure exactly how many they put in, 9 or 12.
Yeah.
They had over 350 submissions for full-length plays.
Man.
So I was shocked when it got accepted for that. So first Vaughn called me in January saying he wanted to, knowing it was still work in progress, offering me a workshop production to help develop it. And because he loved that it was a play about a challenging subject, but also that used humor. It was hopefully an accessible.
Yeah, I love that about it. Yeah. Oh gosh.
And then so that was the first draft, and this was like draft 20 something.
Yeah.
That ended up being shown on the Playhouse stage, and that doesn't mean I rewrite everything of that, but it kept
right.
Yeah, it was, and I still knew, even going into the opening, there were still things I had questions about, still things I had wanted to change, but it would have been too big of a change. It would have, you change one thing and it wonks everything else out.
Yeah.
So I went to the Valdez Theater Conference with some specific questions, and those 3 questions were about structure, if the structure worked, 2, if the tone worked, because I've kind of characters on different levels, and Celia, the character of Celia, her reveal, if that worked. It had other questions too, but those were my big 3 ones. And in my rehearsal, I was like, on Thursday, I was exhausted, and I was suddenly had like no confidence in my script. Going to rehearsal with these actors I'd never met or I met that week, and having made a few changes to the script from the end of the workshop till the final draft was due for the Valdez Theater Conference, just a few. I changed the music and music therapy. I changed a few things. But I really felt like I was suddenly terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And then right before the reading on Friday, I went out and I sat down, and it was raining, it was chilly, I'm under a covering, and a crow comes, sits down right next to me and starts cawing.
Hmm.
Actually, there are ravens out there like they are here. And I videotaped it. And I'm shaking. I'm so nervous and I'm so exhausted. But I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
And I'm just like already, I mean, I could have gone home, it would have been worth it. But here it was. And part of it was that I really want to do the story justice. And it's no longer, something shifted there. It was still my story when I saw it at the workshop. But it's the story about those who are still suffering in the mental health system. And for me, my goal is to make it a powerful story. So it's a story that can be told and heard. And so I quickly Googled crow medicine, and it was spot on. It was all about letting go of self-doubt in order to tell the story that you have to tell
Oh my
for a
gosh.
greater purpose.
That's amazing.
So the reading, they did a fabulous job. I got such tremendous feedback from the panelists. You get 3 professional panelists.
Great.
I got great feedback from them. I got a one-on-one with my main panelists the next day. We had a cruise that night. I had all these playwrights coming up to me talking about the play. I still get emails about it. And then, between my reading and walking down to get ready for this little closing night cruise, I went to walk up this lookout that I hadn't gone to yet. And it was just this little lookout. And there's bear signs there. And I go up there and I'm looking for a bear, no bear. And I called my friend and told her how it went and shared the good news about the production in Chicago. And then I'm walking back down, and right in the middle of the path, there's suddenly this gigantic porcupine. So I videotaped that.
Yeah.
And I followed it. I didn't know it was a porcupine yet. I got that close to it.
Yeah.
I don't have any quill scars. Just yesterday, I finally looked up porcupine medicine. And it was absolutely perfect.
Huh.
It was all about being really grounded and protecting yourself when criticism comes, to stay true to your voice, to your story. I'm getting so much feedback of I got the whole spectrum in the workshop production, from people that hated it to people that loved it,
Yeah.
And a lot of people that saw the things that still didn't work, and some had ideas, some weren't sure, some had really clear, strong, passionate ideas. And I was just exhausted. It took so much out of me to write this play, because it is from my experience. I have had, I hit bottom with major depression and PTSD when I was 31 and was hospitalized for the first time. And I suddenly didn't have insurance because I had to leave my job to get help. And I suddenly, for the first time since age 16, I didn't have insurance. So I was put in where low income, and started this journey, pretty much a nightmare journey in the mental health system. But at the same time, I also explored alternative therapies. And theater and writing were really kind of what kept me tethered to this earth and gave me hope and purpose, a reason to stay alive. And when I fell back into suicidal depression many times over the years, looking back, it was a time when part of why I really just didn't want to live was my creative spirit was gone. It just wasn't there at all. There were other issues, a lot of trauma and this and that, which Ariane in the play reflects my journey. But I'm 56 now, and I've healed so much of my depression, healed so much of my PTSD, but I have very real physical issues because of my long-term use of prescription medication, which I was pretty much strong-armed to get on and to stay on. And it wasn't until I had to come off of those medications, and I'm not saying that there's no place for psychiatric medications. I'm not saying that at all. It's just that it's become the easy fix. It's all chemical based. Well, it's not all chemical based, and our brain chemistry changes because of trauma, because of trauma and all kinds of things, addiction and all that. We have to deal with those. But you don't just give a pill and it fixes it. And there's very real side effects. And I spoke up about this during my whole journey in the system, and it made it very difficult for me in the system. I was given pushback after pushback, we're the big, strong doctors. And what I also saw is, because I was hospitalized several times over a 25-year period, I also saw what changed and what didn't change in the mental health system. And the reliance on medication, it's the go-to thing. It's the go-to thing. And it wasn't until I had to start coming off of the medication, which was very, very extraordinarily challenging, and that's why a lot of people don't. But what happened was I started to heal on an extraordinarily deeper level. So I wrote this play because, one, I needed to write it for me to heal, but I am also, this next step in my life is I can start being an advocate. And there is this underground movement even within the mental health system. It's big in England. The psychologist has made a huge backlash against psychiatry for this over pharmacology. And there's an underground wave that's happening here in the United States too. But there's so much attachment. Money is so attached to the pharmacology industry. And actually the thing that helped me, I wouldn't have survived coming off of the medication. I would have just had to come back on if it wasn't for CBD oil, which is illegal, from hemp. And it was astounding to me. I was like, and people use it for anxiety, depression, PTSD. I was like, well, if this was given to me when I was 31. So, it's a huge play for me in terms of, it brings up so much. The process of writing it and rewriting it, going into the workshop process with a fabulous cast, and Christine McHugh as the director, Vaughn Irving as the dramaturg, and then the fabulous, really amazing production crew, lighting, everybody, sound, Jeff Nell as sound, Monique who did lighting, Silka who did costumes, Vaughn who ended up doing the set and took over as Dr. Froud. They all worked their butt off and did so well, but I always felt this pressure of, I need to make this play better. I need to make it better and better and better, while digging up all my stuff at the same time and functioning. And that was really hard. And I'm exhausted.
I bet,
But going to Valdez was such a validation, and to get this incredible support there, and people from all over the country telling me that they believe in this play and they believe in the importance of it. And the most heartening thing was getting, during the workshop production afterwards, from the performances I attended, complete strangers coming up to me and telling me, thank you for telling this story. I was a patient in that hospital. I was a psychiatric nurse in that hospital. Several psychiatric nurses told me, their stories, and it breaks their hearts, Anyway, boy, I just went off on a long rant, didn't I?
No, it's one of the, when you have those deeply personal stories that are kind of brewing in you, and then this magical magical, however you want to call it, circumstance comes about, with Vaughn mentioning the female version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that suddenly, this thing that's been, obviously it's just been percolating under for a long time and needing to come out. That was the the impetus. I love those stories.
And the other thing too is I was 56, when I started writing this play, and I was a broken-hearted frustrated playwright. I did little stuff here and there, and I've had stuff produced around. But I never was able to keep myself stable enough because of my own issues to stay in one place long enough and be within a community where I was supported. And so the Santa Fe theater community, I moved here 3 years ago, very, very sick. I was in ICU. All I could do was meditate, and it came to me, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd never been here. I didn't know anybody here. I knew nothing about it. Santa Fe.
Now, where were you?
I was in Southwest Colorado.
Okay.
I was there for 5 years. For a year and a half, I was pretty much bedridden and homeless, living in a shelter and in somebody's kind of back room. And people were saying, oh, you'll never be able to afford to move to Santa Fe. I couldn't work. I was so sick. It's like, I'm going to find a way. It was just calling to me. It just kept calling to me. So I landed here 3 years ago. The very first thing I did was audition for a reading at the Playhouse. Barbara Hatch directed me. And I just put my toe in slowly. But I tell you, it's just one of the things that for me was so great here is that I see all these. It's like, oh, you're 56. You're young.
Right.
And it was like, oh, I can do this still. I'm not dead yet. And having gone through this really serious illness, which was life and death for a while, when I came out of it, I was like, you know what? F it. F my insecurity. F my, self-doubt. I've got to do what I've really dreamed of doing. And I wanted to act again, and I wanted to really make a commitment to my writing. And I've been able to do that here in Santa Fe.
Gosh, that's wonderful.
And meet these incredible people.
Right,
I mean, and all these people doing this amazing work. There's such amazing talent in this, and integrity. Every theater town has their one, you got to, and growing pains and this and that. It's everywhere, but I'm really struck with people tell me, oh, what's the theater like in Santa Fe? And I say, it is vibrant and growing.
Yeah.
And so many wonderful, talented people.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
You're a big
agree.
one.
Well, you too. And and hearing your story, I mean, that's what I love too. It's just, I mean, people, there's so many diverse stories. People that have either come here or they've grown up here. They're doing theater in all different capacities. And well, that was, I mean, hearing the journey of your play is just really inspiring, because I always feel like, the art that comes from the most deeply personal place is always, it's the most satisfying journey, and it's the most rewarding. I mean, it's difficult. It can be the most difficult.
Oh, I had this real aha. Excuse me.
Oh, no, go ahead.
That I had been writing around this stuff for decades. This is the first time I've really, some of these issues, I'm writing right to it. I'm just writing directly to it. I don't think I couldn't have written this play 10 years ago. I wasn't strong enough to, but I also don't know if I would have gotten an audience for it. I don't know if I would have gotten a reading of it anywhere 10 years ago. Yeah. So I think that I'm also really lucky, I think, with the timing of it, that it's actually a play that people want to see now, that there's an awareness of, because it's not only the structure of the mental health system, which is so broken. We see broken in our politics, in the school systems, in so many different ways. At the same time, telling a personal story.
Right.
Now, there's one more thing, and then I'll let you.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely.
Is for the art. Fortunately, craft has always been essential to me, and I never felt like I felt like I was always still growing as a playwright. Nothing I had ever done, I felt like, okay, that I nailed it. Maybe a monologue here or there that came out of a longer piece. Oh yeah, I really like that. So with this play, I got so much feedback, and I could just kind of be like, okay, well, what do I do now? And I went to Valdez kind of overwhelmed and exhausted. and then got so much feedback, and I came back really just worn out and needing to recover and frustrated because I couldn't just get to it and start solving some of these problems. But what happened, because I had to listen to my body and rest, take care of my physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health, all of a sudden in the middle of the night, one of the characters starts talking to me.
Interesting.
And then another one, and it's like, oh, that's all I need to do here is listen to what are the characters wanting more to say. Because that was the big, I got notes on structure and tone and this and that and Celia's reveal, which were all helpful and great. Some I agreed with, some I didn't. But the overall thing was, God, is they had questions about certain elements of the character. They wanted to see more. They wanted more information about the characters. And I thought about that, and I was like, anything structural issues I have, I can fix every single structural craft issue if I go back to character, if I go with each of them.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, it looks like the workshop won't be until April of next year. Callie really wants to give me the time I need, the time she wants to put together a really strong production team, cast, and all of that.
Yeah.
And that was what Vaughn had told me. We debriefed after the workshop production. He says, you did this so fast. The workshop process was so fast and so intense. He said, I want you to have the time to now play and explore the things you didn't have time to.
Right.
So,
Nice.
yeah.
Wow. Well, that, when you're talking about the characters, because that was one of the, I saw the production, I was so moved by the characters and their specific journeys, and one of the characters that he just like touched me to my core was the
Bernard.
the man who's looking for his wife.
Doris.
Where did he, is that based on someone you knew, or I was just
Every single person in there is based on someone I knew.
Yeah.
Some are, Nurse Hammer and Dr. Froud are combinations, but all of those, all of the patients are all based on specific people.
Yeah.
I layered stuff onto them, but, so Bernard, the very first time I was hospitalized, there was a woman in the room next to me. I never saw her. And all day and night at intervals, she would just call out. And you could tell she was elderly. Nurse! 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 And they just let her go on and on. She was in isolation for whatever reason. And I heard her, I'd hear the nurse go in and give her her meal and talk to her. And the patient would go, Mary, Mary. And the nurse would go, no, Mary's not here today. Mary. And she would just, and then she'd start sobbing for Mary. And I think Mary was her daughter. No, Mary's not coming today. No, Mary. Here you go. And then as soon as the door would close, nurse, it would just go, and it was just, so that was the seed for Bernard's character. But also, I saw these men and actually, and they're usually men of color, like African American, older, poor men that should have been like in a nursing home that were there in the mental hospital, just given meds, who were obviously just dementia, but they're in this low income psychiatric unit. So that's where.
Yeah, well, that moment, I mean, that, and one of my favorite moments in the play was at the end of the first act when he sings, and that's just that, his soul, it was really, I mean.
And that
really
was
beautiful.
Donald James Converse, the actor, in the workshop process. It normally didn't end like that.
Really?
And Donald says, he said, what if I think he started humming the sounds. He started humming it, right? And I don't know if he said, what if I start singing it low? And then I was like, no. What if you start singing it? You're the only one left in the room.
Wow. Well, that's the, I mean, and you're saying, I mean, that's just about how workshops are so, just how, yeah, just how much they are a part of the process of running a play.
I was craving it. I was
Yeah.
so craving it
Yeah.
because that's where I first learned playwriting with Ensemble Studio Theater. I took a workshop back in the late 80s. It was for actors who want to write by Cassandra Medley. And she had us work from a very sensory, physical place, when the characters come out of your body, come out of your true self, your authentic self, but then through the eyes of the character. And that just was gold for me because I was, an actor. And then when so often I'd take playwriting workshops because I fell in love with the craft of playwriting. One, because it was the 80s and the roles for women were so limited. I'd seen Fool for Love off Broadway, Sam Shepard's, and I was like, now that's the kind of roles I want to play. And that's the one I want to see more. And so I started I wasn't reading plays. I mean, that play hit me on a visceral level. But but it was more still kind of the male point of view, but beautifully done. But I needed my voice. I needed to. And so writing was a key in. And I digressed. So often the classes I took had a workshop feel to it. We had actors and playwrights, and I started a group, co-founded a group in Portland, Oregon, that's still going strong. And that's what we did. We'd get playwrights and actors together, and every week we'd read new pages with actors and get feedback. And it was so helpful. Yeah. And I've been an actor in a workshop process of a new play a couple times. That. I love it.
Me too, yeah.
And all of the actors, they brought so much. Danielle Reddick. Celia was just a patient in the first draft. It came out because of questions that Danielle raised about her character that I said, let me play with this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, Marguerite, this conversation has been inspiring to me on many, many levels. Thanks so much for sharing your process and your journey. It's been very, very inspiring.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share all this, and I hope I was coherent.
This was wonderful. And I just want to tell our folks out there that if you, again, joining us for the first time, we do post these in videos on our Ironweed Productions Facebook page, and we also announce future interviews on that page. So please like us and follow us on Facebook. Also, Theater Santa Fe is very generous about posting our interviews on their community page on their website, which is theatersantafe.org, and they've also got a lot of wonderful information about theater artists for theater lovers, so check out their site again, theatersantafe.org. Actually, and we do have our next interview is right around the corner, July 2nd, next Monday at 6:30. I'm going to be interviewing Santa Fe writer and actor Bronwyn Davis, so please, I hope you'll join us for that. But thank you all very much for joining us. Again, thank you so much, Marguerite.
Thank you, Scott.
And good night.
Good night. And go see Ironweed's plays. Yes.